and then we'll begin in just a moment. All right, give me a moment, and I am going to start our PowerPoint this morning. I consider myself pretty tech savvy, but for some reason, I do struggle a bit sharing documents in Zoom. I don't know if you guys have that issue or not. So bear with me just a moment. Keep your fingers crossed. And please tell me you're seeing the PowerPoint this morning. Awesome, first time. That rarely happens with me. All right, good deal. All right, give me just a second here to get organized a little better, and we will get started today. All right, first of all, I've already talked about welcoming you to the superintendent update today. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to do, really our goal today is to provide you updates and resources for you and your district. We'll be talking about several things as we go through the process of our meeting today. Mark is going to talk about the new implementation timeline that NEE has developed. Sherry will be talking to you later this morning about effective feedback and performance improvement plans, and she has some great information there. And then I'll be ending the meeting today talking about MSIP 6 and APR, and I have quite a bit to share, and I'm sure we'll have some questions as we go along too. Speaking of questions, as we go through the process today, if you do have a question, please drop those in chat. Our team's going to be monitoring that. We'll be happy to answer those as we go along. Unless we have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and get started this morning. So let's go to our first slide. I want to mention first, I talked about Kathy at the help desk a moment ago. If you notice on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see the email address and the phone number for the help desk. I know we probably have some new superintendents or perhaps some people new to NEE that are here with us today. I will encourage you at any point that you have any questions or concerns or need help, call the help desk. Email the help desk, let Kathy know, and she'll be happy to help you. You can see on the left-hand side of your screen several examples of things that Kathy can help you with at the help desk. I'll mention a couple. If you have any data tool issues, Kathy is happy to help you with that. There's a lot she can do as far as guiding you and helping you resolve those. One of the things that Kathy has mentioned is there's been some questions lately about superintendents who are having to rehire teachers who've been with the district before, left, and are now coming back. So if you're having any sorry about that, call Kathy and she'll be more than happy to help you as we go along. Also, rosters, sometimes we'll have people that will have some trouble with the upload of the rosters. If you're having any roster upload issues, also let Kathy know. And again, as you look through the list there, there's several other things that either Kathy or the rest of the NEE team will be happy to help you with. If there's any question or any doubt whether or not you should email or call, just go ahead and do that. There's no dumb question. We'll be able to be happy to help you with whatever need you have. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We're going to turn over to Mark now, and Mark is going to talk about the monthly implementation timeline. So Mark, if you'd like to introduce yourself and share your information, that would be great.
Thanks, Chuck. Mark Doss, been involved with NEE since the beginning. 11 long years ago, and primarily, well, I can't say just Southwest Missouri, work with districts throughout the state, but primarily in Southwest Missouri. Now, of course, with Benji coming on board, that gives me a little bit more time to work with our new districts in Kansas and Nebraska. So as that effort in those two states continues to grow, I'll be spending more and more time in Kansas, Nebraska, but that's my primary role. Still very involved with NEE every day. The timeline implementation document really was something that early last summer we kind of realized that we've got a nice set of documents to lead principals through their implementation of the teacher evaluation process. And we even have a sister document that leads supervisors of principals through the principal evaluation process. So we've got a couple of existing timelines, but we didn't have one that was strictly for the district office personnel on how to manage NEE and how to keep from the district office view, keep all the wheels turning properly and not miss anything. It seems like that was just something that we assumed you picked up on, but as more and more new superintendents move into their positions, it seemed like Kathy was getting more and more questions about some of these processes. So during the summer, we developed a new document that's intended for the central office personnel. In some of your districts, you're the only one there, then you have the full gamut of work, and you'll probably do every one of those tasks. In other larger districts, these tasks may be split across 2 or 3 different offices in a larger central office operation. These are, again, intended to give you the heads up month by month on the tasks that should be taking place, or reports that you should be looking at, and processes that should be happening in your school, in your schools, so that you're up to date and knowledgeable about all facets of need that are going on. Kathy's gonna, or Kathy already has put that document in the chat box. So if you want to open that and save that to your machine. Now, that document contains all 3 of the timelines: the one for teacher evaluation, the second one for principal evaluation, and the third, which is the new one, on the superintendent district office level task timeline. So all 3 of them are put inside that one. If you don't need the first 2, you can strip them off and just use the one you need. But just hoping to provide you with a resource there that keeps you up to speed on all the moving parts within NEE. I'll keep my eye on the chat box. If any of you have follow-up questions, I'll be glad to answer those through the chat box. And again, as the PowerPoint list there, if you don't get it saved here, you can always go back to the help and resources, type in the search bar at the top, type timeline, and that document should pop to the top, and you can open it up, and there it is for you. All right, Chuck, I'll hand it back to you. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And again, don't forget, as Mark said, to if you don't get that copied or saved on your computer, don't forget that you can't access that, as Mark said, in the help and resources section of the data tool. Okay, next let's move to Sherry Patterson. Sherry's going to talk to us a little bit about effective feedback. As you know, feedback is something that we've discussed in training over the last several years. And Sherry wants to give an update just on what we talked about in training, but also just kind of give a general update about how to use the feedback process. So Sherry, if you don't mind introducing yourself this morning and talking about feedback, that would be awesome.
Good morning. As Chuck said, my name is Sherry Patterson. I'm coming to you from St. Joseph, Missouri, where I support the principals, superintendents, and districts in Northwest Missouri. We would like to talk to you today about feedback paths. In case you haven't been through a training, we have spent the last couple of years making sure that principals realize that it really does nothing to just assign an observation score to teachers if you're not having appropriate feedback with them. And in having appropriate feedback, we have realized and have been training that it's important to diagnose what the teacher's need is, to be able to match the teacher's need to the appropriate feedback path. So if I were a superintendent or someone who is supervising principals, this would be an amazing topic to study, to give them practice with, to talk about and collaborate as a group, maybe a principal meeting, just to practice on identifying, maybe through a video clip that we have in EdHub. Here's the teacher, what's the teacher's need, and what is the appropriate feedback path. So we have that all in one nice little document called an effective feedback path conference. It's in just a document that lives in EdHub, and I believe in help and resources. So you could lift that out for your own review. If I were actually going to watch and supervise a principal or give feedback to a principal, chart in front of me so that I could talk with them. We've also added onto that chart, so not just only what's the appropriate path, what are the appropriate questions? We've also added a section, what would be appropriate activities for a teacher to be engaged in as a result of this conference. Anyway, it is definitely worth taking a look at that as a superintendent, as you work with principals and supervise principals. So we can move on to the next screen. Any questions about feedback, the feedback paths?
Yes, that's like the new thing. Well, and it's interesting because now, everybody wants to meet, and, because you can do it by Zoom. So it's like an increase in meetings. But then I will say the flexibility of the Zoom space, I think has helped, but at the same time, it's now, folks kind of have this sense of we can always meet because all you need to do is just hop on a Zoom. So, yeah.
And so while you're having those Zoom meetings and you are giving feedback to your principals, it would be great for you also to be familiar with the effective feedback paths as you're communicating with your principals. So pull that up and maybe those Zoom meetings will be more efficient and more effective for you. Any other questions about the feedback paths? Okay. Moving on. I am convinced and sure that you have already read all of the blogs that NEE has written about professional improvement plans. But just in case you haven't, we were going to introduce that to you and make sure that you know that they exist. And Kendra has taken all of the blogs and meshed them into one nice document. We have figured this out, and I bet you have also, that in principal school, they really do not address writing professional improvement plans. And so even experienced principals who have come, maybe have been practicing for 5 years, and the first time they have to write a professional improvement plan, they are at a loss and they don't quite know where to start or what to do. And so this guide walks them through all of the steps to writing a professional improvement plan. I think what was up on that other screen was, when do you do it? How do you do it? Where do you do it? So all of those things, all of those questions are answered, and they can read them in the separate blogs, or they can go to that nice one guide that has been established. And I do believe that those are now living. You can download it. There's the address, and they are now living in Help and Resources, the Guide to Effective Performance Improvement Plans. So I would absolutely, if I were having a principal meeting, or if you have a weekly memo, I would get that information to principals to make sure that they realize that is available to them. Any questions about the professional improvement plan guide? Okay, if not, Chuck, I'll turn it back to you.
Hey, thanks, Sherry. I will mention too that I have had conversations with some other districts where superintendents have shared this guide or shared this information with their principals before they had a situation where they might need to write a performance improvement plan. So it's a good document to have in hand, since, like Sherry said, Kendra has helped put all that together, her and Sherry, into one document. Before you have the situation where you're writing a performance improvement plan, where you can go through and look at the guidance that's there and be able to have a help with that. Because that is something we know that's very beneficial. I'll also mention too, you have the link there, but also Kathy has put that in chat, so you're able to download that if you'd like to. So if you're looking to download that guide, you can do so in chat right now. So feel free to do that if you'd like to. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and begin our discussion about APR and MSIP 6 this morning. First of all, let me say before we start, and I think I said this in an earlier presentation too, I'm just an average guy who enjoys reading the MSIP guide or the guide to MSIP 6. I know that's kind of weird, that's something that I enjoy doing. But I do enjoy looking at the data. I do enjoy looking at the guide. But the reason for telling you that is because I don't work for DESE. I don't have ties to anyone at DESE. And really all the information I'm sharing today comes from that comprehensive guide and the other materials that you can find on DESE's website. So don't forget to go there and look at that information as we go through, because I think it will be very helpful. Give me 1 second here. Okay, I do want to mention too, I'm going to be giving you a lot of information as we go through today. If you, with the busyness of starting school and all, if you have not looked at the latest comprehensive guide for MSIP 6 that DESE posted, they posted that somewhere around the middle to end of August. If you haven't looked at that yet, then I'm going to be sharing a lot of information that you've not seen before. If you have looked at that, you'll probably be somewhat familiar with that, but I may go into a little more depth than maybe what you've looked at. So it might be a good idea to take some notes as you go through today. But I will say, I will be going somewhat fast to cover everything, and it may be hard to keep up. When you'll receive an email later that shows you how to get a link to the recorded webinar that we're doing this morning. And in with that email, there'll also be a copy of a cheat sheet, so to speak, or my notes as you go through. It'll have all the information we're discussing today, as well as the reference page in the comprehensive guide to school or to MSIP 6 that's on DESE's website. So just know that you will be able to go back and watch the webinar again if you'd like to. You'll also have that cheat sheet, and that'll help you as you go along. I do want to remind you too, what we have on DESE's website with this latest edition of the comprehensive guide to MSIP 6 is still a draft document. So everything we talk about today is still subject to change. So don't forget to go to that website occasionally. If you don't know where that's at, if you go to DESE's homepage, scroll down, click on MSIP. Once the MSIP page comes up, look on the right-hand side, scroll down a little bit, find MSIP 6, and that's where you'll find all the information that DESE is providing for MSIP 6. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the discussion this morning. So first of all, APR, as it's listed in the MSIP guide, consists of two parts. There's a performance score and a comprehensive continuous improvement score. The performance score is worth 140 points. The continuous improvement score is worth 60 points for a total of 200 points. Now, in with that performance score measure, the first one that we've mentioned, there are 5 different areas that you can look at. Give me 1 second, I'm sorry. Okay, we're on the right slide now. My PowerPoint's acting up on my end. There are 5 different parts to that performance score measure, and those are achievement status, achievement growth, success ready, graduation rate, and graduation follow-up. Now, if you're accustomed to looking at MSIP or APR information, the achievement status and achievement growth will be nothing unusual. You're familiar with graduation rate and graduation follow-up. Success ready really is not, even though it has a different name, is not something that's different. Basically, success ready in the performance score measure is going to be the old CCR measurements that we had in APR in the past, and we'll talk about those in just a moment. Now, we talked about the 2 parts. That's the performance score. Then we also have the continuous improvement score. And there's basically 3 measures that go with that continuous improvement score. And those are improvement planning, which is your CSIP. Then we have the MSIP required documentation. And we also have another success ready measure as well. The improvement planning and CSIP is going to be, we're going to talk about that in just a moment. There are multiple parts to that. Again, we'll talk about the required documentation too. And the success ready really will be things that you're mostly familiar with. It's really more data uploads, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. All right, let's go ahead and get into some of the highlights in the MSIP guide that you may not have seen if you haven't looked at the newest guide. And these are kind of they're not necessarily in all the performance score measures and all the continuous improvement. What I tend to do is to look at the highest point values first. And so since achievement's a really important part of that, we'll look at that first. So under achievement, I want to mention too, I'm sorry, I keep scrolling the slide. I want to mention one of the things you may not have noticed is that DESE has indicated that only 2021-2022 assessment data will be included in the 2022 APR report. So what that means is that there only be information from that most recent assessment data, that 2022 assessment data. So that means there won't be any progress measures at all. So where we're accustomed to looking at, you have the status and then you have the progress measure. That progress will not be there because we're only using that 1 year of data. Now, just know in the 2023, 2024 APR, that progress measure will come back. But for this current year, it's just going to be the data, the assessment data for the 21-22 school year. Now, as I mentioned too, in the past, APRs, we've had 3 years of data for that status calculation. Now, again, we're not going to have that because we're only going to have that 1 year of data right now. But understand in 2023, 2024, and going forward, DESE is going to go back to that using in 2023, 2 years of data, in 2024, 3 years of data. So the scores that you've got in 2022 will count not only for this year, it'll be your only score, but it'll also count in 2023 and 2024 also, because we'll go back to that 3 years of data as we go forward and work that in. Also, if you're looking at the guide, there is a small adjustment made to the proficient scores for all students and student groups. I'm talking about how those scores are given in APR. That's listed on page 18 if you'd like to look at it. Again, it's a small amount, but I do want to mention that there were some small changes there. Also, status targets have been released for both all student and student groups. So previously, we had the achievement level scores. We used to refer to them as the cut scores, and you may do the same thing. Now you have also the status targets as well. Now, remember that DESE changed how they're doing the individual MPIs for students. So in the past, we remember that if students had a below basic score, they received 1 point. If we had, for every one of those, if we had basic, it was 3 points, proficient was 4, advanced is 5. Now DESE has changed that. Instead of a score, I'll just take below basic, for example, instead of having just a score of 1, there's going to be a range of scores from 1 to 3 or 1 to 2.99 to be specific. And depending on where those students fall in that below basic area, that's how many points they'll get. And it's the same thing for basic. There'll be scores from 3 to 3.99, proficient 4 to 4.99, and then all the advanced students get a score of 5. So when you're looking at those status targets that have been released, and if I didn't mention, those are on page 18 and 19 of the comprehensive guide. What you're going to see is that DESE did make some small changes to that where those targets are a little higher than they have been in the past, which is understandable because you're going to expect those individual MPIs to go up some since we have those range in scores now. Now, I will tell you, I had an in-depth conversation with the district last week, I believe it was. And one of the things that we noticed about those scores is that when students are scoring in that higher range, for those individual levels, it really does make a pretty good difference on that score that you get for APR purposes for that subject. So the reason for telling you that, where many years ago we used to look at those bubble kids, we said, and Sherry knows what I'm talking about, we looked at those kids who were just on the verge of getting to basic or just on the verge of getting to proficient. Now, since we've got that range of scores, if you take a student from low below basic to high below basic, it's going to make a pretty dramatic increase if you have several of those on that overall MPI score for those students, so for that subject area. So just know that that growth, no matter where those students are, and if you're talking below basic or basic, if they move within that achievement level, it's still going to make a significant difference on the MPI score, which is different from in the past. So that's just something I want to share with you. I didn't realize quite how dramatic it could be when you have several students until I had that conversation last week. Also, one of the things you'll notice in the guide is that score breakdowns for growth calculations have been removed from the guide and are now listed as to be determined. So if you've been following the different guides that have been released, that growth calculation has been there. So I will mention that it is to be determined. I will say that there will be no scores on the preliminary APR that you receive for growth. So when you get that first APR, that one that's for your view only, you won't see any growth scores at all. But the final APR will have growth scores included. We just don't know exactly how that's going to look. I assume DESE is making some changes to that, but they'll share that information when they have that. All right, I'm going to move on now to improvement planning. So we're going to that continuous improvement score and looking at improvement planning. And specifically, we're talking about the CSEP when we're talking about improvement planning. So that there are 3 parts to improvement planning. As I mentioned, the CSEP, but you also have a response to standards, which is an Appendix 8, and then the climate and culture survey. Now, one change that's happened with this newest guide is that DESE has required a CSIP pre-planning guide that districts must complete about their CSIP. And so when you upload that CSIP, you'll want to be sure and upload that pre-planning guide with the CSIP, and there'll be instructions that DESE will have for that. That pre-planning guide is in Appendix G, and basically what you're doing is you're answering questions about that CSIP. So when DESE is looking at that rubric, which we'll discuss in just a moment, they're able to see how you went about that process and how you developed your CSIP plan. Also, the rubrics, if you're familiar with the past uploads that DESE has had of the comprehensive guide, those rubrics for the CSIP have now changed. They're quite a bit different, actually. So they've gotten rid of those rubrics for how you score the different levels on the CSIP. And now what you have is you have, for each of the 5 indicators, you have 3 to 4 met, not met statements. So you have 5 indicators, 3 to 4 met, not met statements. Each of those indicators is worth 6 points each. So 5 indicators, 6 points, that's a total of 30 points. Basically, what you have to do for each one of those indicators, DESE will want to show that you've met a majority of those met, not met statements for you to receive the points for that indicator. So let's just take the first indicator, for example. If you're looking at your met, not met statements on that indicator and you meet a majority of those met, not met statements, you're going to receive all 6 points for that indicator. If you do not receive a majority of those met, or if you do not meet a majority of those met, not met statements, you'll receive 0 points. So they're all or none when those points are given. And again, 5 indicators worth 6 points each for a total of 30 points. But for each indicator, you'll receive either all or nothing, depending on whether or not you met a majority of those statements. Also, I know many of you have been looking at that climate and culture survey. DESE has said that districts may administer a locally developed survey, a survey purchased through a vendor, or the DESE developed survey. So unless I'm wrong, DESE hasn't released their survey yet. I believe that's coming relatively soon, so you might be on the lookout for that. However, if you want to develop your own survey, or you want to look at a survey purchased through another vendor, just know that there are 3 things that must be in that survey. And you can find those items on page 49 of the comprehensive guide. Basically, you have to show through your survey that the school system assures student voices are heard and respected. You have to show the school system provides school culture and climate data and reports periodically to all stakeholders, and that educator teams address positive classroom learning environments. So I would go look at that on page 49. Just look at the survey that you're looking at doing and making sure you address each of those items on your survey. Each LEA will receive an improvement planning review every 2 years from DESE, and that's on page 45. So just know that you're going to be having that every 2 years. Those improvement scores will be reported on the 2024 APR after every school has been evaluated. So as you go through this improvement process and you get your CSIP and you submit all that information to DESE, you'll receive a score for that, but that score will not appear on the 2022 APR or the 2023 APR. And the reason for doing that is DESE wants to make sure everyone's been through the process one time before they count that score for APR purposes. So in the 2024, everyone's going to have then an improvement score that'll be listed. Know that that improvement score will stay on your APR for future years until you go through that improvement process again. So that is an important thing to know as you're working on your CSIP plan. If you're a first cycle participant, you have to have those CSIPs and that pre-planning guide uploaded by December 15th of this year. If you're a second cycle participant, you're going to have those plans uploaded by August 15th, 2023. So if you're a first or second cycle participant, if you haven't already been busy with the CSIP process, improvement plan process, you're going to be as you go forward. By the way, Kendra has put a link to that comprehensive guide, that draft guide in chat. If you'd like to download that, it'd be a great thing to download to your desktop and have so that you can look at that in the future. All right, let's go ahead and talk about success ready students now. And I'm going to start first with the performance calculation. So the performance calculation for success ready students will be based on 2 items, each of those worth 10 points for a total of 20 points. So the first item will be the CCR assessments. And again, if you've worked with APR before, this is going to sound very familiar to you. You're looking at your graduates and how they scored on the ACT or SAT or ASVAB or all those work keys, all those other assessments that are given that you can receive points for. So that's just really, the calculations are pretty much like they were in the past, but that's going to be worth 10 points depending on how your students score on that CCR assessment. There's also, the second thing is also an advanced course calculation, and that's going to be based on your AP scores, your IB, Project Lead the Way, or IRCs. So again, each of those is worth 10 points for a total of 20 points, and that's true for our K through 12 districts. But if you're a K-8 district, you're going to have a different calculation because obviously you won't have those assessments. So for K-8 districts, you're going to have one item worth 10 points, and that's going to be the high school readiness. In K-8 districts, you can find that on page 25 of the comprehensive guide. So that will be there, and you can have that calculation for you instead of the 20 points. I just know K-8 districts, your information, your APR calculation will have a different denominator when those calculations are made. And so just know that that's going to be a slightly different calculation on your percentage, but because of having the 10 points instead of 20. Eduardo, I just saw your question too. Yes, there'll be an email that will go out that will tell you how to, Kendra's saying that now, how to access the recording. It will be, I believe, in EdHub, but there'll be information for that. There'll also be a kind of a cheat sheet or My Notes that'll be included also that will have the page numbers in the comprehensive guide so that you can look at this information and then look at that further on your own. All right, I'm going to cover a few more things in with Success Ready students. First of all, if you've been looking, let me just say, if you've been looking at the comprehensive guide through the different versions of it, you're going to kind of know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, this isn't going to make a whole lot of sense to you, and that's okay, because what I'm going to be talking about are some changes and things where things have been moved around. First of all, if you've been looking before, the ICAP calculation was going to be a performance calculation, and DESE in this latest guide has moved that to a continuous improvement calculation. So there will be a calculation for the number of your students that have an ICAP file, and that's going to be in the continuous improvement. There was previously in the guide a high school progression to graduate. And basically what DESE was doing is they were having you look every year at your freshmen, sophomore, juniors, and looking at the number of credits they had and how they were progressing toward graduation. That calculation's been removed. It's no longer included in the comprehensive guide. So just know that's not there. Now, I'm talking about the performance part right now of the Success Ready students. Now I'm going to move to the second part of Success Ready, and that is the continuous improvement. In the continuous improvement, DESE has actually moved quite a few of the calculations that were listed before. So now there's only 3 calculations, and those are school entry readiness, K through 12 regular attendance, and the ICAP, the ICAP completion that I mentioned just a moment ago. The school entry readiness is something that if you've worked in core data before, or worked on implementing this or inputting this information, it'll be somewhat familiar. It's basically whether your students are coming in ready for school in kindergarten and you have to input some information about that. That information is going to be scored based on completeness, not how ready those students are coming in. So just know that that's there. The second thing I mentioned was attendance. Again, it's pretty much the same calculation we've used in the past. And again, that ICAP completion. DESE has also added a section in with Success Ready students describing how districts can earn 2 extra points for expanding their career and technical education opportunities up to the 12 points possible. So that's actually been a feature of APR in the past. And what that means is you can earn 2 extra bonus points for expanding your career and technical education, but there are only 12 points total in this area. So you can't go past that 12 points. Otherwise, if you get those 2 points, you were already 11, you're not going to get 13. You're just going to get that extra point and go to 12. But if you're below 10, you will receive those 2 extra points if you do that expansion. If you want to look at that further, that's discussed on page 38 of the comprehensive guide. Now, I also mentioned a moment ago in with the continuous improvement that there is a required documentation too that DESE has where you have to upload certain reports. DESE's now released what those reports are. And those reports are the annual audit report, the ASBR report, and required MOSIS core data calculation. So basically how that works, if you upload those completely and on time, you receive the points for that. If you don't, I'm sure DESE will take points off in some manner. It's not really clearly listed in the guide how that will be done. But the important thing to know from that is to try to get those in timely and try to get those in complete. Now, I know sometimes districts have to change that ASBR after they submit it. I don't know how DESE would work with that, but I think I'd rather get it in on time and as complete as I could, even if I had to make changes later, rather than being late with that ASBR. So just mentioning that little piece of advice there. All right, we've talked about several things this morning in regards to the APR. Now I want to get into how NEE can help with this process. And so I'm going to list several things. Again, these may or may not be helpful to you, but hopefully you can take away some of these things to help you in your process of going through APR and specifically the CSIP. One thing that I want to mention is you're probably, if you're working on the CSIP, you're probably going to go through a needs assessment of some point. And I would recommend including in that needs assessment some of the NEE reports in the data tool, especially with your focus indicators. So reports such as the indicator trend report, which will give you information about how your teachers are doing with your focus indicators. You can look at that report not only for the current year, but you can also, if you go to the filters, you can go back and look at that report in prior years. So if you want to look at 2 to 3 years of data with that indicator trend report, that will give you some really good information as you're looking at your needs assessment on how those focus indicators, how that's going with your teachers working on those. Also, you probably want to go ahead and look at your student survey summary as well. And what I would do is I would look at that student survey summary and compare it to your indicator trend report and look for similarities and differences in there. And as you go through your needs assessment, consider what that might mean.
Chuck,
yes.
This is Gretchen Guittard. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was wondering if you had any samples of needs assessments. We've been working on developing or revising our CSIP, and I haven't run across any. So I didn't know if maybe you could post some or send some out.
Actually, I've got a couple things I can mention about that. It's a good question, Gretchen, by the way. I don't know that we have necessarily samples yet. However, one of the things that we're working on is a guide to how to go through this needs assessment and CSIP process. So we don't have that ready yet, but that should be out soon. So look for that coming out, and I think that will be helpful to you. It is something that we're working on right now. But I also want to mention another thing too. We do have a blog post that's coming out, and it will be, I don't know if it's out yet, but it'll probably be out later this afternoon. Evidently, it's out now. Kendra just posted the link now, but that blog post does go through a little bit of information about how to go through that needs assessment and how to incorporate some of the NEE data in that needs assessment as you go forward. I don't know if it's exactly what you're looking at, Gretchen, but I think it will be helpful to you. So look at that blog post and then also watch for that upcoming guide for how to go through that CSIP process. I cut you off, Gretchen. I'm sorry.
No, I just saw the blog being posted. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. A great question. I appreciate that. Okay, we were talking about the indicator trend report and the student survey summary, but another report I think I would also look at if I were going through a needs assessment is the teacher survey summary, because it'll give you some great information about how things are going with climate in your building, how things are going with the implementation of NEE. And I would take that student survey information, and if you also have that climate and culture survey, I would look at that and kind of use those two in conjunction with one another. I think that they'll both give you information, but sometimes not the same information. I think that would be helpful as you go through your planning process. Okay, a few of the things I'll mention too, as you're going through your needs assessment and as you're preparing to work on your goals, one of the things I would advise you to do is to look at your focus indicators that you have currently. Your focus indicators may or may not change depending on the goals that you select as you go through this improvement plan process. So if you look at your focus indicators and you decide to change those because of your goals, that could be an action step in itself in with your plan that you're working on, showing that you're addressing those needs and you're going to use the focus indicators as one way of working on addressing those needs. However, you may find that as you go through that process that you really don't need to change those focus indicators. You're already working on what you're working on and you need to continue with that. I still think I would count that as an action step, because what that shows is that you have a long-term plan and that you're continuing to work on improvement that you're searching for with those focus indicators. Also, don't forget about including your PD that's associated with those focus indicators. And I would include EdHub on that as well as an action step with those associated CSIP goals. So when you're looking at your focus indicators, look at that PD that's going to be with those goals and make sure you include that as an action step. I'm going to change gears just a little bit too. I mentioned earlier that there's a response to standards documents that districts have to complete. One of those things that's mentioned in those response to standards documents is how you're addressing high quality early learning. So if you look at many of the most common rubrics that we use, you're going to find in many of those, you'll see an ECE or early childhood education component, and it shows how those rubrics look and how those various levels on that rubric look in an ECE classroom. That wording alone might help you as you're completing that response to standards document. If you're having trouble wording what you're doing, you can look at that and see, how that's worded. Or it may be that you look at those rubrics and you see some things that you're not using in terms of early learning that would be helpful. Either way, I think those rubrics and that ECE components in there will help you as you're writing your plan. Also, many of the rubrics, even if they're not focus indicators, have descriptions of behaviors or strategies that address that response to standards document in areas such as intra and interpersonal skills, effective instructional practices, culture of high academic and behavior expectations, and equity and access experiences. So it might be good to look at those rubrics, because I think what you'll find is you're doing some things you might not think of. And when you read those rubrics, you'll go, oh, I'm doing that. I can copy that in my response to standards document. Or in some cases, it may give you some ideas of things you might want to incorporate. So even if they're not focus indicators, it still may help you with that response to standards document. Also, I want to talk about EdHub for just a moment too. I mentioned earlier that it can help with your PD for your CSIP goals. Just remember that EdHub contains modules that address many of the prompts in the response to standards document. So not only will EdHub help you with possibly some of your action steps in your actual plan, but it also has things that you might want to include in your response to standards document as well. All right. I'm going to move on for a second to another topic. Sherry mentioned feedback paths this morning. And for those of you that are using that effective feedback in your feedback conferences and those feedback paths can be a structure for instructional improvement used in classroom observation feedback conferences, because one thing is it offers individual targeted feedback for every teacher. And so that's a great action step when you're looking at incorporating feedback in with your action step for those CSIP goals. But it also provides guidance so that teachers leave the conference with clear next steps and a clear path for follow-up, which is what you want. Our research has shown that if teachers can leave that feedback conference having confidence in the information you've shared with them and in that clear plan for follow-up, that is the best way for you to have actual instructional change in the classroom and to have a positive effect from that feedback conference. So don't forget that those feedback paths could be an important step for your action steps. Those feedback conferences can address academic achievement for overall students and groups. It could be an action step for improvement plan, or it could be part of an answer for a response to standards prompts. Okay, I've mentioned too earlier that the growth calculation is no longer included in the comprehensive guide, but it will come back. DESE said that calculation will be there in your final APR. So remember that we do have a unit of instruction. So if you're looking at growth for your students, which is a great way to increase your points on the APR, you might want to consider incorporating that unit of instruction, which is designed to look at growth for individual classrooms, especially if you're looking at maybe some of those target areas for instruction. But not only will it help with that growth calculation, but as we were talking about a moment ago, with that scale of scores now for each of those achievement levels, for below basic, proficient, and advanced, now making growth just within those achievement levels can have a pretty positive effect on your overall MPI score. So just remember that unit of instructions there. It might be something that's helpful for you as you go along to help with that growth of individual students. Now, Gretchen asked the question earlier about the guide or about having any guidance for that CSIP process. I do want to mention again, we do have an upcoming CSIP process guide. It's designed to identify focus, goals, and action steps to develop a district growth cycle. Just know that that is coming at some point as we go forward, probably in the near future. I'm looking at Eduardo's question here. Unfortunately, Eduardo, I don't have a clue on that one. I don't have any advanced knowledge of that. I don't know if you guys have seen any of the releases on that from DESE. I have not seen that there. They put a date out yet for that APR report. But you might, if someone has seen that, please post that in chat. But I would watch those releases coming from DESE. And those memos should state that date when those APR reports are coming out. One more thing I want to mention too is that we actually a couple of things. NEE is also hosting a series of MSIP 6 support hour meetings occurring monthly to provide districts who would like to participate with a forum for discussion and questioning a vehicle to do so. So really what the goal of that is just to really gather people together who are working on MSIP 6 and to share information for that. Our next meeting is October 12th at 9 a.m. and Kathy's put the link in chat for you to register for that if you'd like to. Now, what we've been doing again so far in our first meeting was really just sharing information. But in the next meeting, I know we're going to dive a little bit deeper, maybe into the points for the various APR areas. But that's secondary to any questions or any thoughts that you have. So we'll open the meeting with sharing, with you having a chance to ask for things that you want. And then through that support hour meeting process, what we're hoping to do is to gather some resources that we can post in EdHub. And I know Kathy's already working on that so that we can have a place for you to go to look at information from other districts as we go forward. Again, really, we're just providing a place for us to get together. But I do think that'll be very helpful to you if you're needing some help or just needing someone to bounce ideas off with and get information from. I think those support hour meetings will be very helpful. Again, those are occurring monthly, so don't forget to watch for those. And again, hope to see you there if you'd like to register for that. Mark also indicated in chat that you might want to check with your state supervisor and they may be able to give you information about more details on the APR release timeline. And I know I have seen some information being shared from those state supervisors, and they seem to be the best source of information about MSIP and APR as you go forward. So don't forget to check with them. Lastly, I want to say too, watch for our blogs and newsletters. We're continuing to monitor DESE's MSIP 6 comprehensive guide revisions, and we're continuing to provide updates about the revisions and how we can help as we go forward. So watch for those blogs, watch those newsletters. Of course, the newsletters are emailed to you. The blogs you can access off the NEE homepage, www.neeadvantage.com. Blogs up in the upper right-hand corner, and you can see that information there. I did just have one thing pop in my head, which happens sometimes, and I want to be sure and share that with you as well. I mentioned that on DESE's homepage, if you go to the MSIP 6 page, I talked about going there earlier, that you'll find that's where the guides are released, but there's also some additional information as well. If you scroll down that page a little bit and look under where it talks about having the public meetings for MSIP 6, DESE has posted a PowerPoint from those public meetings, and that PowerPoint really is a good place to look at some basic information over MSIP 6 and specifically APR. One of the things I know it has, looking at this morning, it has a description, or it has a chart, actually a table of APR in 2022, 2023, 2024. It shows what's going to count and what's not going to count in each of those wins, and how each of those APRs and how things are being incorporated. It also has those achievement level scores in a neat package. You can look at all those in one place. So you might want to go look for that PowerPoint that DESE's put on their page. And also, like I said earlier, continue going to that MSIP 6 page about every week or two, because I think you'll find some good information being posted there. And of course, don't forget to check, as we said earlier, with NEE, because we're continuing to monitor this situation as well. That being said, that is everything that I have this morning. So I'll stick around a little bit. If you have questions, feel free to put them in chat. We'll try to answer those. And then also, like I said, we're going to stick around after the meeting's over. If you have some individual questions, we'll be happy to share that information. I had a thought, it just left me. Maybe it'll come back in a second. But anyway, just remember to continue to watch for the information from us. Also, Kathy put the link to our help desk and to our phone number for the help desk in there as well. Continue remembering to reach out to us anytime that you have questions. We're always happy to help you. And again, that's one of the things that we pride ourselves in, that our support's really good. We're always happy to help you with that process. And again, we mentioned the blog, and also don't forget the announcements and the data tool as well. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions in chat, but again, we're going to stick around for a moment. If you have any questions at all about anything we've talked about today, feel free to stick around, put that in chat, or talk to us. We're going to hang around, but otherwise that does conclude our presentation today. Thank you for all your input, and appreciate all of you joining us today, and hope to be able to see you soon. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Again, we're going to stick around for a minute, but if you'd like to leave, feel free to do so. Bye, everybody.